places where people are drinking and people are drunk. I cannot be in those spaces.
Mhm.
And for a long time, I operated in autopilot, self-neglecting and self-abandoning and going to such places, even though I knew it wasn't good for my mental health. It wasn't good for my nervous system. Literally, I get dysregulated the minute I start interacting with somebody who is drunk or drinking, because it is a constant reminder of my experience with my dad as a drunk person. So I go into hypervigilance, which is starting to predict and play out how this scenario is going to be in the worst case scenario, because my experience was with a belligerent drunk, not with a happy drunk.
So, guys, thank you so much for joining. This is my inaugural podcast, Kavaya Daughter Speaks. I had put out a small intro a little while ago. So, Kavaya was my mother, who was like a phenomenal woman. And I'm Kavaya's daughter, and I'm speaking. And today I'll be speaking with the fabulous Joan.W.Mwangi. When I first met Joan, I told her that I like her diva energy because she's so energetic. She's so passionate about what she does. So her name is Joan.W.Mwangi. She's originally from Nairobi, Kenya. She's living in the metro Atlanta area at this point. She's an evolving human being, a mother, a lover of music and animals, and especially elephants. She's a certified adult chair coach, and she focuses on the inner child healing, boundaries, and emotional wellness. And she has group classes. She also has individual sessions. So however you need her, I'm going to post her information after the session is done. But I want Joanne to introduce herself and tell us who she is, what she does, and why she does what she does.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I'm seeing comments saying that my volume is low. Can you all hear me okay? Zippy,
I can
you're the
hear
one?
you.
Okay, perfect. I'm just going to keep talking. So,
Yeah.
yes, I love elephants. I think as human beings, we can learn so many things from elephants because their emotional intelligence, I think, in the animal kingdom is it. As she said, my name is Joan.W.Mwangi. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I am a mom, I'm a daughter, I'm an auntie, I'm a cousin, I'm all the things that a human being can be. I describe myself as an evolving human because I am consistently learning about myself and changing myself so that I can be a better human for other humans. That is my goal in life. I do coaching as a passion. During the day, I work as a HCM consultant, which is human capital management. I implement HR software for those of you in the US. It is just software that helps employers manage their employees in terms of payroll, benefits, time and attendance, performance management, that kind of stuff. My background is in human resources. And human resources, the coursework in school involves a lot of human psychology, which is why I was drawn into inner child things. But the main reason I do this work as a coach is because from experience, I was raising a child and hurting her tremendously based on the things I was doing. And I came to realize that the things I was doing to her are the things that were done to me. And in the world we live in right now, our children question and our children will challenge us on the bad behavior we come with as parents. And it takes us looking at ourselves, acknowledging that we were hurt, acknowledging that we were harmed, because there's hurt and harm. Those are two different things. And also acknowledging that our parents are just human beings who did the best they could. And for me, it also meant me accepting that I was a human being doing the best I could with the tools I had at the moment. So there's been a lot of therapy, a lot of apologies, and we are still working on these things, This is a lifelong journey. And so based on my journey, I realized in our community, and that is the Kenyan community, the African community, the immigrant community, there are things we do that we joke about to our children that are not funny, that are harmful, and that affect who they become as adults. And so my dream is to see a world where children are raised by parents who are not hurting them in the name of parenting and in the name of discipline. So I will stop there.
Okay.
Continue.
Okay. So Joanne, I know that you, of course, have the experience of the African child, because you are an African child born and raised in Kenya. But I'm also sure that you also coach other people who are not of African descent. So I'd like you to integrate whatever you see in the American community and the African community. So now my question is, are you able to draw from some of your childhood experiences to help us understand where you're coming from?
Of course. In fact, a lot of the so to go back a little bit, when I started going to therapy, it was because my child was in turmoil, serious turmoil, that she attempted suicide. And when we started therapy, we were going to the same therapist, but she was seeing the therapist separately and I was seeing the therapist separately, because I needed to understand what I need to be able to support her and to be able to help her through her journey. And Dolly, your face has disappeared again. We're just seeing your eyes. So that's better. So the therapist started asking me all these questions about my childhood, how I was raised, what my parents were like. And so for me, of course, there was resistance there immediately, because why are you asking me about how I was raised and we're here about a different person? I need to know how to support her. But then the therapist told me, a lot of times you do what was done to you as a parent, because how your parents raised you is a template of how to be a human being. So whatever you saw in your home, consciously or unconsciously, is what you're doing to this child. And so through the conversations, because it took hard conversations, it was me having to sit there and listen to her telling me how I hurt her, right? So there are things like being emotionally absent. So I would tell her when she was a teenager, I don't want the school to call me. Your role in life is to be a decent human being. Go to school, get good grades, come home. I don't want to be called by your teachers that you're misbehaving. You have no reason to complain. You have everything you need, blah, blah, blah. What I did not know is she was being bullied in school. She was being bullied in the church that we were going to. So, and then I was a bully at home because I would not listen to her. When she'd start telling me things like, I don't want to be here, and I'd be like, okay, then go where you want to be. Right? And that closes the door for any discussion. And I'd be triggered and I'd be telling her, if I'm such a bad parent, go look for other parents. So then that shuts the door for her to be vulnerable with me about what's going on in her life. So by the time she was in her early 20s, she was dating a horrible human being, because guess what? All the human beings in her life as a child were horrible, including me, and we were not safe. So she was repeating whatever it is she was experiencing. On the outside, everybody admired us. We had a good relationship, but internally she was dying, literally and figuratively. So that attempt to suicide was a wake-up call for me as a parent. And lucky for me, unfortunate for many, is that that child is still here, and she still continues to teach me, and she still continues to challenge me in the things I do. She's 28. The suicide attempt was before her 21st birthday. So it's been 8 years of working through these things. So one of the things that I can draw from my childhood is that I grew up in a hostile home where my emotions were not even allowed, right? My father was an alcoholic. My mother just struggled to get us to keep going, you know, to have food on the table, to go to school, to do all the basic things that we needed. But our home was not safe. My dad would come in his drunken stupors and kick us out in the middle of the night. We would spend the night outside, and then in the morning, we'd figure out a way to get in, shower, go to school, spend the day at school. So for me, as a firstborn child, my life was in a constant state of panic, constant state of worry about, will my father kill my mother? Will we have a place to call home tomorrow? All the things. So that in itself is a human thing. It's not just an African thing, because domestic violence is everywhere.
That's true.
Domestic violence is everywhere. A child feeling emotionally unsafe at home is not an African thing. It's a human thing. It is, anybody and everybody can experience it based on who your parents are.
Yes, and actually statistically, there's very little difference between the different groups when it comes to domestic violence. So it's the rich, the poor, it doesn't matter, because domestic violence is not a money thing. It's a heart thing more than a money thing.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the things I'm able to connect at a human level with my clients, regardless of where they are from. Being loved as a child the way I needed to be loved, because every child is born as a unique human being with unique needs, and I give parents grace because children don't come with manuals. They really don't come with manuals. And if you have multiple children in a home, each child, you have to be very attuned with yourself and with the child to be able to recognize, okay, Dolly needs this version of me and Joanne needs this version of me. It's not a one size fits all. And then life comes at parents fast and furious. You're working, you're doing all the things, the kids are doing all the things. So it's not as easy as many of us make it sound. If there's any parent who is consciously raising their children, kudos to them, because it is very, very hard.
True, it's very hard to be there consciously, and especially if you have stress from work, you have stress from maybe your relationship, stress from your friends, your relatives. It's very difficult. You have to make a conscious decision. So in your experience, what do you see is the most common source of trauma? Because that's what we call it, right? Because it is trauma. Yes. What do you see presenting in the different communities you interact with? What do you see presenting? And what are the things that we should look at in ourselves while interacting with our children, spouses, co-workers, friends, and relatives, that should be like a red flag, right? To tell us, hey, there's something here
happening. So maybe I'll first define trauma, because especially for us as Africans, we tend to say, I don't have trauma. I don't have trauma.
Yeah.
Because we look at trauma as war, rape, violence, all the things. But how we were raised, the schools we went to, can be a source of trauma. So some people don't have trauma from their homes because their parents were amazing humans, but then you have trauma from school, or you have trauma from your religious environment, whatever the religious background you have. So trauma, the source of trauma can be many different places or many different types of people. And trauma, I like Dr. Gabor Mate's definition of trauma. And he says trauma is what happens in you as a result of what happened to you. So it's your reaction, your body reaction as a result of what happened to you. And for majority of us, the source of trauma is emotional abandonment, because we are raised by emotionally immature parents. And from an African context and an African American context, or from a context of people of color around the world, I like to say colonialism, racism, patriarchy, and all the isms have a role to play in the traumas of all of us. And from a Kenyan perspective, colonialism did a number on our ancestors, whoever they were. So if you can trace back who was there before you. So for me as a Kikuyu, I trace back to my great grandparents, right? Because they were alive during colonialism. And their livelihood changed to fit into whatever the colonialists needed them to be at the moment. So how the Kikuyus, I speak about Kikuyus because that is who I know, not because I don't want to speak about the other tribes. It's because that's who I'm associated with. For example, pre-colonial times, Kikuyu children were not beaten. They were not whooped by adults. They were talked to, they were taught the ways of being and the way of being in that community. But the colonialist came with violence on the men, violence on the women, and that translated to violence on the children. And that was also introduced in the schools. So children were being whooped in schools, right? And so if you're my age, you probably went to school and you were beaten by a teacher because you did something wrong. Instead of correction, you were punished. So colonialism introduced punishment as a means of correction and shame as a means of correction, instead of whatever was there culturally before to correct children, to correct adults, to correct anybody in the community. And so now, as we live in the world we live in, we are interconnected with the rest of the world. We are adapting cultures that may not necessarily be what we grew up with. And the world is changing around us. So people have to do what works best for them. However, when we look back, we see the effects of all that change showing up in the homes and how we relate to each other. So all of us carry an emotional wound that is not spoken about. So you carry the shame of your mother, you carry the shame of your father, they carry the shame and the pain of their parents. Unspoken, it is called emotional inheritance. And so when you pass this on to children over and over and over, you have adults who are doing things and they don't even know why they're doing the things they do.
Mm-hmm.
If your mother had a deep fear of something, you more than likely have a deep fear of the same thing, even if she never told you anything about it, just because of the way she behaved around that thing.
Mm-hmm. I agree, because I look at myself and I have very small examples. They might not be emotional, but just examples of why I did some things I don't know why I did. So, for example, nail polish, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We were told that first of all, if it was red nail polish, it was for the prostitutes, right? Like, it wasn't for regular people, right?
Yes.
So there was that
Yes.
stigma. So if you as a child liked nail polish, nobody would allow you. Or if you stole your mother's nail polish or somebody's nail polish that was red, you'd be in really big trouble, because that color was associated with something different. But also, we were not allowed to put on nail polish because we were told that you're not going to pay attention in school.
Yes.
And so coming here, that's exactly what I did to my daughter, who wanted some nail polish, and I was like, no, you're not going to have nail polish. I had no reason, really no reason. But then one day it just dawned on me, why am I not allowing my child to wear nail polish?
Yeah.
Number one, she's in an area where she looks different. So, and I'm denying her the opportunity to do things that other kids are doing that are really innocent. And when that light bulb moment came, I decided, okay, I'm gonna let her, have nail polish, because it really wasn't an issue. And guess what? After doing it for 2 or 3 times, she didn't want it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a very surface example. But I have a more emotional example when children question us, right? At least I know that I was not allowed to question my parents.
Yes.
And so when children question me, when my kids would question me, I would get annoyed, like angry, like, why are you asking me? You're not supposed to ask. But I had no reason. And they're asking innocently why. But because I was raised in a time when we didn't ask questions, and I was never told, don't ask me a question. I was never told. I just know that that's how things happen. Like, you never asked adults questions. And so I did project that on my kids. And even to this day, although I'm a little bit better, I don't like to be asked by my kids,
Yeah, yeah. I think also children are here to teach us. Children are here to mirror. And if you pay attention to children, they will teach you how to be authentic, especially very young children. I like children under the age of 5, because at that point the world hasn't really gotten to them to mold them into something they're not. 2-year-olds are perfect because they will tell you no, and their no's are strong. The rest of us, especially as adults, we get triggered by a child's no, and then we mistreat the child because they've said no. Whether it's something as small as I don't want to eat that food, or it's as something as small as I don't want to go to that house, I don't want to go visit your friends, or something as major as I don't like your mother. And I usually say what I'm seeing in my classes that I host with both men and women. A lot of us were invalidated by our mothers, including men. And we don't acknowledge that a mother can be the best thing that happened to you in many, many ways, but also be the person who hurt you the most and who defined how you relate with other human beings. Not because she woke up and intentionally decided she's just going to be this horrible human being, but because she was doing what she needed to do at the moment when she was raising you, and she didn't know better. So we then bring that wounding in our romantic relationships, and then the children become the recipients of the dysfunction. So if, like you said, if you're pissed off with your husband, your children are going to get the brunt of it. If you're pissed off with your boss, your children get the brunt of it, your husband gets the brunt of it, right? We don't know how to sit with our emotions and feel them and let them move through us, and sometimes excuse ourselves from people and places so that we can go feel those emotions, so that we can be better humans for other humans, including the children.
Okay. What do you think the impact is on us as adults when it comes to boundaries?
Oh, boundaries is such a complex, yet very easy concept. I think for those, depending on the home you grew up in, because boundaries are not hard for everybody. But I see boundaries being hard for us and our community. And when I say our community, I'm speaking about Black people, because it is hard to say no, because we attach meaning to any request that a person has of us. So I'll give an example of us as Kenyans, and I think also most Africans do this. When somebody dies, we collect money to help with the death, right? To ship a body home, to bury the person, all that. And there's nothing, and please, people do not misconstrue what I'm saying. There's nothing wrong with doing all that. However, many times people are giving not because they have the money to give, but because they are like, if I don't give, people will not give when I have an issue. It is scratch my back so that I can scratch yours, right? So for those of us living in the US, we have the privilege of being able to get life insurance, or for being able to save money, to plan your life in a way that can afford you the privilege to take care of things like burials and things like that. And I'm not talking about extreme issues whereby somebody has been sick and all this. I mean, there are many different situations. However, there are so many times that you're giving and giving and giving with the hopes that when it's your turn, people will give. Yet if you're no longer there, you will not know whether people will give or not give.
That is true. Joan, can you give us an example? And I know that this is a topic we cannot cover in one day. That is just the truth. It's very valid, but I want us to give like a little bit of something, in the different areas. Can you give us an example of your personal experience, meaning something that happened to you or was instilled in you or was the way of life for you that still affects you to this day, even though you are an inner child coach? Because sometimes people think that if you're a therapist or a coach, like you have it all, right?
Yes. The one that comes to mind automatically is places where people are drinking and people are drunk. I cannot be in those spaces. And for a long time, I operated in autopilot, self-neglecting and self-abandoning, and going to such places, even though I knew it wasn't good for my mental health. It wasn't good for my nervous system. Literally, I get dysregulated the minute I start interacting with somebody who is drunk or drinking, because it is a constant reminder of my experience with my dad as a drunk person. So I go into hypervigilance, which is starting to predict and play out how this scenario is going to be in the worst case scenario, not best case scenario, because my experience was with a belligerent drunk, not with a happy drunk. Right? So for some people, if a person is a happy drunk, that's what you know, it's okay. For me, I'm not waiting for the happy drunk to become a belligerent drunk. I start getting nervous, I get anxious. So I have made peace with the fact that being in environments where people are drinking and possibly will get drunk is not an environment for me, because I still cannot function in those environments, and it still affects me till today. I'm going to be 53 next week, and it still
happy
affects
birthday.
me. Yeah, thank you. So that is an example of something that affects me. Something else that I can say for sure still in the back of my mind kind of affects me is being yelled at and being scolded, or somebody speaking in a harsh tone. Kind of makes my insides just, I don't even know how to explain it, because it reminds me of all the times I was scolded, whether it was in school or in church or at home or wherever I went as a child. Back when I was growing up, it was when you did something wrong, you're scolded at home, then you're punished by your aunties. A week later, then during the holidays, you go, your grandmother scolds you about the same thing. So it's a constant reminder that something is wrong with you.
The village mentality, right?
Exactly. So all that would make me feel a certain way. And I think that is a part of me I'm still working on, when somebody speaks in a way that triggers that memory. Yeah.
You know, we were talking about an incident, and someone was telling me, no, children are resilient. They won't, they'll get over it, or they'll get used to it. And from what I know professionally, the opposite is true. You'd rather have trauma when you're an adult than when you're in your formative years, because when you're in your formative years, it sticks when your body is, your cells are being replicated and all that stuff, everything is being formed. That's the worst time to have trauma or to have bad experiences. But people always say that children are resilient. What would you say to someone who says, oh no, they're kids, they're resilient, they'll get over it? What would you say about that?
So I would say resilience is directly related directly related to how you were raised, and it is also very directly related to how your life was in the first 2 months of your life. That means when you were in your mother's womb to the first 2 months outside of your mother's womb, because that is when attachment happens. It is when you are getting to understand the world around you. Children can be resilient, but also the truth is children just adapt. They don't forget. It just becomes, I will change myself so that I can survive this environment. So for example, domestic violence. If you're in a domestic violence situation like I was, I learned how to mold myself in a way that I will not be noticed, so that the attention is not on me. I learned how to not speak up. I learned how to just shrink myself so that there's no attention to me. That is not resilience.
No, it's not. It's adapting to your conditions. And then, but grown-ups would say you're resilient, though. Most grown-ups would think she's resilient, but the truth is you're changing who you are and you're going to react, you're going to act a certain way when you grow up because of your experience. So that really is not resilience. It's you adapting. Because when you're not, for example, in a domestic violence situation, most children report that they're afraid of doing anything that triggers the perpetrator, right? So
Yeah.
that's why you're quiet. That's why you're unseen, because you don't want to say something that triggers, for example, for you it was your dad, or triggers whoever it is who is violent, right?
Yeah.
So you decide to keep quiet, even if you're a bubbly child. So now you become timid, and then you find that you grow up and you're a timid person, but that's not really who you are. You're always wishing, like, I wish I could just speak up, because of the trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think also what we fail to see in children is that when a child starts changing themselves, it is time for the adults in that environment to start asking questions, hard questions. Because resiliency, for example, in adults looks different from resiliency in children. I say when there's illness, right? Like children with cancer are very resilient compared to adults with cancer, right? Because they have that childlike mentality. They know they are loved because they are loved on. Things are happening for them, and everybody is doing the best they can for them. But when a child is in an environment where they are emotionally unsafe, physically unsafe, not seen, not heard, not understood, that shutting down is self-abandonment. And they learn how to survive that and how to thrive in that. In the eyes of the adult, you're thriving, but there's a part of you that has died. And that's the part of us that as adults, we say, oh, I'm not a creative person. I don't have creativity. Or I have no passion. I don't know what my purpose is. Because those things were beaten out of you, whether it's with words or with physical whoopings or with action, a part of you died consistently with every moment where you were unseen, any moment where people were unkind to you as a child. Because children need to be seen and loved unconditionally.
I can give an example of myself. I'm talkative, but when I'm comfortable, I'm very talkative when I'm comfortable. But I do remember that I was, a very talkative and bubbly kid. And quite a number of people around me told me, niko na kimbelembele, right? So for those who don't understand what that means, it's kimbelembele is, what would you translate kimbelembele to be? Like,
a know-it-all.
Kind of, yeah, I know it all, yeah. And as a child, of course, I was not a know-it-all. I just said what I felt and what came to my mind. I was just being frank.
A child.
Right? Yes, I was just being a child. But to this day, that has affected me. I find myself like not speaking up when something happens, and then later on, I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I said this. I should have said this. I should have said that. But that is something that was killed a little bit in me. But I do have one teacher that I remember, Mrs. She was called Miss Nyagi, and then she became Mrs. Kimathi. She really loved me, and she told me, and she was just about to go on maternity leave, and she told me, Dolly, not everybody's gonna understand you, but I think you're such a beautiful person. And I was like in second or third grade. I was like tiny, and I was the teacher's pet. She loved me. I'm the one who I was the cupboard keeper. We used to have the key to the teacher's cabinet, and she really loved me. And I remember when she was going on maternity leave, she kind of gave me like a short talk on how to survive because the next teacher might not understand who I am and stuff like that, you know. And I remember when she came back from maternity leave, she actually took me to lunch one day with her. Like we went out of the school, you know, when the bell rings, everybody goes and sits in the field. I went with her to her home and, you know, she had lunch for me and then she brought me back. We were a little bit late, but she talked to the teacher. So she became like one of my favorite teachers, but it's because she saw me and she heard me and she didn't judge me because I was just innocent. There was nothing wrong that I was doing. I was just being a child. Yeah. And I'm just thinking about some of the issues that affect us, you know, globally, like, for example, parentification. What would you say about parentification? Because I know a lot of the people who are here are parents, but what would you say about parentification?
I think parentification, and just to define parentification, it's giving a child adult responsibilities, and it's usually not intentional. For example, in families where there's, say, 6, 7, 8 children, the oldest child becomes responsible for another child and another child becomes, so basically you have children doing adult responsibilities. That to me robs a child of their childhood. It robs them of their innocence. It robs them of their I amness. I call it I amness because God gave us a unique way of being as individuals, and when that is taken away from you as a child, you don't get to build it because it grows with you. And if now at age 9, like for example, my mom was a parentified child because her mother died when she was 13 and there were 7 children including her. So she became mother to her 6 siblings and the youngest was 9 months old at the time. So she had no choice, right? And that happens in many homes. It also happens here for us living in the diaspora where when the parents have to work and you have an older child and you leave them and make them responsible for the younger children. Single parents, I have full compassion for them because I don't think many people intend to wake up and be raising kids by themselves. But life happens, whatever the thing happens, right? And you're left with no choice but to have children responsible for children. And that just strips a child of their innocence. It strips them off of many things. But at the same time, it also gives them skills that make them survive the world better than most people, even though they self-abandon in the process.
Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yes. So I guess the best approach would be to give your child responsibilities, but with good measure, like not all, so that the child cannot be responsible for the older. And I'm not saying it's easy to do this, and I'm not kind of pretending that, you know, there's not complex issues surrounding, you know, bringing up children. But I guess the best thing to do would be giving them that responsibility occasionally so that they are able to get those skills that come, you know, being responsible, but at the same time, they're able to be children, because I do know a lot of people who are parentified and you know, and it shows, you know, as you said, with when it comes to self-abandonment, when people now think of everybody else other than themselves, and so they're not even giving 100% of who they are, their authentic self, because that's what happened to them when they were younger. And you know what? I'm thinking about that, and I have to talk about my mother for a minute, because this is Kavaya's daughter, right?
Absolutely.
She was very wise when it came to that, because I remember there's a time we didn't have a house help, and my mom stayed home for a couple of days, and I remember the day that the house help was coming. She was late. She took us to the neighbor's house to wait there for the house help, and she told us to keep on looking out. So she was very intentional, because she would have just left us by ourselves for, while she was looking for someone to replace the house help who had left.
Yeah.
But she was very intentional, and she did not parentify. And even I remember, letting us go to Nairobi downtown, like I would say Nairobi town.
Yeah, to the
It
city.
took a while
Yeah.
before my mom, it took a while before my mom let us, go to town by ourselves. And I'm thinking a lot of kids were going to town by themselves, but she was very intentional. And I do know some people who told her, "You're spoiling your kids," but she was like, "I don't care. Like, these are my kids." And I remember there's a lady who, an older girl who would walk with us to the bus stop, when going to school. Not because I even remember her name, not because we were not able to, but my mom felt that she wanted,
Safety.
she wanted safety. So,
Yeah.
Joan, I have a question here.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody says that she has a dad who
Mm-hmm.
was very harsh, and whenever the dad came, they
Mm-hmm.
would scatter. Okay, let me read it the way it is, right? I
Okay.
had a dad who was mukali. Mukali means harsh.
Yes.
Yes, we would scatter whenever he came home. I am a single lady in my 40s. How can my relationship with my dad affect my perception of men?
Oh. I think so it can go either way. I don't truly believe that all of us do like attract who our dads were or our moms were. However, there are elements, very strong elements of who our parents are in our significant others, in the person you choose as your significant other. So maybe for her, how that would manifest is she might not be the kind of person who likes a kind man who is not harsh. She only knows how to interact with men who are harsh to her and maybe mean spirited to her. That's the only way she knows. Or on the flip side, like me, who is not able to deal with drunks, she might be like, I never want a person who is harsh like my dad. So each person's individual journey is very different and very difficult to quote unquote diagnose,
Mm-hmm.
especially as a single woman. Because if you're in your 40s, you've experienced childhood trauma, adult trauma, all the things that you've experienced have changed who you are. So, whoever you're dating at this moment might not be even anything to do with your childhood. It could be as a result of one of your adult relationships. So, it's a very hard question to answer from my
Mm-hmm.
perspective.
Okay. So okay, so I got two questions because I had asked people to send questions. So the other question is
Okay.
my mom and I don't see eye to eye. I feel sad, especially when I see my friends relate to their mothers. I just feel like my mother is ice cold, and I'm afraid of the type of mother I'll be, especially because I do not know what a healthy mother-daughter or even son relationship looks like.
So, that one is a very common one in my class, and unfortunately, um, there are mothers, and I'm not saying this is what her mother is, but there are mothers who are just really unable to love. There's a book called Mothers Who Cannot Love, and it gives different archetypes of mothers, and it all stems from childhood trauma. So, what I tell the women in my class and the men in my class who have difficult relationships with parents is to dig deeper into who your mother was as a child. What kind of home was she raised in? But then also, is your mother in a happy environment? Is she in a loving marriage? Is she in a job that is kind to her? Because even adult experiences make people ice cold.
Mm-hmm.
Or is she the kind of person who never received love, and therefore the way she can show love is not the way you as a person want to be loved, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things that could be happening here. But I always go back to one, where did this person grow up? Who were their parents? How did their parents treat them? What was the schools what were the schools like? What was the church like? Because all those environments shape a person, and then also dictates how that person is going to interact with other people, including their children. A woman who is being beaten, who is being mistreated, who is being unseen, and all the bad things, is not going to be a super loving human, regardless of how you look at it. They may show some love, but it's hard for them. It's really, when you think about yourself as an adult, when you're going through hard times, are you an extremely loving, cuddly person, or are you ice cold? I usually say people who need the most love ask for love in the most unloving ways.
Yeah. Okay, so what would you say, how would you describe daddy wounds? What are daddy wounds?
Father wounds?
Yeah.
So a father wound is it's an emotional wound caused by a father or the lack of one. Some people have daddy wounds that are caused by the father. So it could be toxic masculinity, where a father did not present himself as a healthy man who was loving and kind and all the good things to his family. It could be emotional absence. It could be violence. It could be so many different things. But in short, the way I explain a mother wound, father wound is basically a wound caused by that primary parent that makes it hard for you to relate with that sex. So if it's a mother, it makes it hard for you to relate with women. If it's a father, it makes it hard for you to relate with men. A lot of men tend to have father wounds that are not even talked about. And it shows up in the form of banter. Men are unkind to each other when men are going through things. One of the things we see in our community is when a man is going through hard things and they become vulnerable, they are told, we watch our mama.
Can you translate that?
That means stop being like a woman. Or wacha kukaliwa. Stop being controlled by your wife or by a woman, right? And a lot of times it may be what you saw at home, or it may be what you did not see at home that's driving you. So it's an emptiness that was not, it's an emptiness caused by the lack of emotional connection, the lack of physical connection, the lack of the father or the mother really truly seeing you as a person the way you needed to be seen by that parent. And then it affects how you relate with your spouse and how you relate with children, how you relate with people in general. Yeah.
So Joan, how would you suggest that we start looking to see, because you spoke about your personal experience with your daughter, what are the steps you took to start the healing process between you and your daughter?
Therapy. More therapy and more therapy. And I like therapy because it's an impartial human being who has no stakes in my relationship, her relationship. This person has no stakes in the relationship. But also, emotional honesty is one of the things that I have to say has been one of the biggest transformative tools for me. And when I say emotional honesty, I mean being truthful to myself about myself and not allowing triggers to make me an angry, bitter person. Right now, anything that triggers me, I look at it and I'm like, okay, Dolly said that. It made me feel a certain way. I wonder why. I look at it with curiosity and I dig deeper to make myself feel better and to understand myself better. So that the next time somebody says the thing that Dolly says or said, I'm able to be like, okay, I know why I feel that way. It's because that's how my mother used to talk to me. Mm-hmm. It's because it's the story I tell myself about how I was seen as a child. Because triggers are a reflection of how you're feeling inside. They have nothing to do with what a person has said or done. So for me, therapy, coaching, doing a lot of inner work, and inner work includes allowing myself to feel my emotions and validate my own emotions, because nobody's going to do it for me. So if I'm angry, I'm angry. How am I feeling my anger? How am I communicating my anger to those who need to know that I'm angry? Mm-hmm. And how am I regulating my nervous system when I'm angry so that the anger does not become rage? Because when we let our anger become rage, then it's taken out on other people who don't deserve it.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think it's very difficult for people to accept that even though your parents are good people or your community is a good community, everybody is well-meaning, that we have wounds that we carry? Why is it difficult for us to accept that? What are the nuances you think contribute to that?
I think one of the things that contributes to that is there is a misunderstanding in the acknowledgement that I was hurt by my parents is translated to my parents were bad people. My parents were not bad people. Mm-hmm. My parents were humans who made human mistakes, and I was the recipient of the human mistakes. Mm-hmm. And I am a true believer that outside of sociopaths and psychopaths, many human beings wake up with good intention every day. Mm-hmm. And then along the way, you get triggered by somebody, and somebody else becomes a recipient of your triggers because you didn't learn how to manage yourself and your emotions.
Mm-hmm. So let's say I was in school, right? Mm-hmm. And Mrs. X used to maybe not even beat me physically, but used to tell me I'll amount to nothing. And I still feel angry because when I think about Mrs. X, it still comes up maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years later. What would you advise me to do? Should I go and look for Mrs. X because I know Mrs. X is in Massachusetts, for example, or Mrs. X is next door, or I see her on Facebook or whatever? What would your advice be when it comes to letting go? What should I confront my I don't want to use the word abuser. My perpetrator or the person who caused, for example, the people who called me Kimbelembele. I can't even remember some of them, but I do remember the one who was kind to me. What would you say? How should we approach that?
I usually say and I've had this come up in my class several times, even with parents. My mom is mean to me. She's always mean to me. Should I approach her or confront her? I usually ask, what is your intention with the confrontation, and what end result are you looking for? And when you don't get the end result you're looking for, then what? Because the people who hurt you do not heal you. And I'm going to say that again. The people who hurt you cannot heal you unless they have done the work and they are willing to apologize and they are willing to change their behavior. Because apologies without changed behavior is not an apology.
Exactly.
So you can go confront Mrs. X. You can tell her she was mean to you and she called you Kimbelembele. 99.99% of the time, those people don't even remember they did that thing to you.
Exactly. So your advice is that we need to look at why this thing is still a trigger to us, and maybe learn
what is truth and fact about you today. Are you Kimbelembele?
Okay, so that's one way of looking at it. Okay, so look at my life today.
Yes, the one question I tell people to ask themselves. If my dad used to tell me I'm stupid. You're stupid like you're stupid like your mother. I graduated. I failed school. I failed certain subjects in school. But now when I look back at my life, I got really sick at age 9, which is when a huge transition happened in our family. And for 3 months, I was in a hospital. And during that time, nobody caught me up with the foundational things I needed to know about certain subjects.
Okay.
So, but I did not repeat the class. I continued with school as usual. And I did not get extra help to catch me up. So fast forward to today. I have a career. I'm who I am. I am smart. I had my undergrad. I have my grad school, my graduate degree. I'm working in a consulting company and doing all the things that I do. And therefore, I can say today, truth and fact is I am smart. So if any time somebody tells me I'm stupid, or that memory of my dad telling me I'm stupid comes to my mind, I ask myself, what is true about me today? I know I'm not stupid. It's just like if somebody told you, oh, Dolly, your orange hair is ridiculous. Is your hair orange, Dolly? No, your hair is not orange. You will dismiss that person with immediate effect. So use the same strategy to dismiss the things that you have carried from your childhood that are not true about you today.
And did you find that when people told you you look like your mother, it was a trigger, especially because somebody else told you? Okay, so that was never a trigger for you.
For me, it's not a trigger. My mother is beautiful. Now, what I find, my dad did not like us to have short hair.
Okay.
And my sister and me, we are 2 girls, had lovely long hair. My mother has very beautiful long hair. And I've always wanted short hair. I always wanted short hair. And the first time I ever cut my hair, I was 13, going to 14. I was going to Form 1. And my dad did not talk to me until my hair grew.
Oh, how long was that?
Our hair grows very fast. So maybe a few months. Of course, I went to boarding school and came back with long hair, right? Because you braid it and it grows. But my dad was like, I don't want girls who look like boys in my house. So now, if there are times I look at myself in the mirror and I see my dad in the mirror, because all Also, the way my grays, now I'm having grays, the way my grays are growing, exactly like my dad's. So that sometimes is a trigger to me, and I'm like, maybe I should grow my hair so that I don't look so much like him, because I don't like that part of him that did not like me with short hair. But I have to debunk that every day. I look at myself and say, and remind myself of all the compliments I get when I walk out there with my short hair. With my short curly hair, right? Because it's all natural.
It is beautiful.
And curly, and people tell me how cute it looks. And I have to remember that there are more people who like me with my short hair than my dad who liked me with my long hair. And he's no longer here.
I see somebody asked a question. I think Teresa is the one who asked the question. And I hope I didn't miss any other questions. I've just seen this one, right? She said, I think her question was, what would you
what's your take? I see it. What's your take on those who use scripture like spare the rod, spoil the child to justify harsh punishments? So religious trauma, I think the Bible in itself, and I'm a Christian, I'm a Jesus loving Christian, and a lot of the scriptures we hang tight on are not what Jesus told us to do. Christianity is about following Christ, and Christ told us to love the church, to love God with all our hearts, or something like that. I'm very terrible with scripture, but I know what it says. To love God with all your heart and love yourself. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Your neighbor is another human being that is not you. So I say to parents especially, because we like to use violence on children as a means of punishment under the guise of I am correcting the child, because if I don't hit them, they will not do what I want them to do. Basically, you're using dictatorship in your home as a means of correction. And I say, if you do not want it for yourself, you should not want it for your child. So if today, as a mother, if you have a husband and children in that home, and your child does something wrong, and your means of correcting them is violence, which is beating up a child, which is also domestic violence. Domestic violence is not just adult on adult, it is also hitting children. That is domestic violence. If you're using physical violence on your child to correct them, my question to you is, would you like, when you do something wrong as an adult person in your home, would you like your spouse to hit you as a means of correction for the thing you did wrong? Typically, adults don't want to be hit. Would you like your boss to slap you when you do something wrong? Because the workplace is a place where we learn new things. It's a place where we get grace and we are taught things over and over. We are put in training classes. We're given mentors. But with children, we just want to hit the life out of them and tell them, I'm the boss, I brought you in, I can take you out. And then we expect them to be wonderful members of society who are not violent on other humans. So my question to you is, do you want that for yourself? If you don't want it for yourself, then you should not want it for your child or anybody's child. To me, it's that simple.
Do you see any other questions? Let me see.
I don't see any other questions. Great conversation, very informative. I don't see any other questions, no.
Okay, so anyway, so now as an adult, right, what are the steps I should take to start examining, like from what lens should I look at myself, right, to start looking at my behavior, what I do, and how it relates to my childhood? How do I start that process for myself?
So I would say so there's three parts to us, and that's why I'm called an adult chair coach. The adult chair is a healing modality that was created to make psychology simple. It's basically, the tagline is simple psychology meets grounded spirituality. Okay. And I would say that there's three parts to us: the child self, the adolescent self, and the adult self. The child self is age 0 to 6, 7. And that part of us is the most authentic part of us. It is a part of us that holds all things wonderful about us. It is also the part of us that holds our true emotions. It is the part of us that has our most authentic self. Then there's the adolescent self, which is the ego. It is our protector, very important. But it is also where all our coping mechanisms live. So if you had to adjust to be a certain type of way to survive your environment, that is your adolescent self. So if you find yourself shrinking when somebody yells at you, your adolescent self is activated.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part of us that most of us live life through. We have not left our adolescent self. And that is the age 8 all the way to age 26, when your prefrontal cortex is maturing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the part of us that is, from a medical perspective, how do you explain it? The part of us that is responsible for logic and emotions and things like that, decision making and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's the part of us that also gets very triggered. It's the part of us that does not operate from truth and fact. It's a part of us that operates from stories and assumptions. And so our adult self is the part of us that sees the child and sees the adolescent and merges them together and lives from truth and fact, lives in the present, does not bring the past into the present, does not bring the future into the present. Which is why we ask, what is truth and fact? So if you're trying to look at yourself from a lens of what happened to you and you want to do the hard work, I think getting guidance either from a coach or from a therapist would be the best, because also not having the right resources can make you re-traumatize yourself. And all coaches, all therapists are not equal. I may not be the right person for you. Dolly as a therapist might not be the right person for you. You have to, I say coaching and therapy are kind of like dating. You have to find a person whose energy meshes with yours, whose energy gels with yours, so that you're able to be your authentic self. If you need to cry, you need to do your ugly cry without judgment. So I tell people, listening to podcasts is a free way to do the work. Asking yourself questions about your behavior is a great way to start. Looking at your childhood pictures and trying to understand what happened. And especially for those of us who have parents who are still alive and you have anxiety and angst when you're interacting with them. Sit with that emotion and find out what it is that is bringing that emotion, and when is the first time you ever felt it. Because like for somebody who has a bad relationship with their mother as an adult, that relationship did not become bad now. It's been bad from when you were a child. So explore what is it that makes that relationship the way it is. Where in your childhood did something change to make your relationship the way it is? Because a lot of times I can almost guarantee it's when you became an adolescent when your mother could not stand you anymore, because now you are becoming your own self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do remember something, which is something, I just remembered something. So my dad was not always there. I love my dad. I look like him, but some people tell me I look like my mom. Now I'm confused. As an adult, I look like my mom. So I'm a little confused, but I've always thought that I looked like my dad. And he's dark, dark and handsome. But I do remember that I did not have that many males in my life growing up that, that we lived with on a daily basis. And so when I had my son, so I got married to a great man, and then I had my son. And my son and my husband would be playing, and I used to get so worked up because I thought that this is so mean. Like how could you play like that? But it's because I had no experience whatsoever of how boys play until my friend Millie told me, no, Dolly, because she has boys only. She told me, no, Dolly, that's how boys are. And I was like, but to me, I'm telling you, in the first few times, I used to get like, even my heart used to race because I used to be like, how can you play like this? This is not play. This is being mean. So yes, our childhood experiences really, really inform us on what we do. How we relate to people later. I see someone said, your mom is so beautiful, Joanne. Somebody said that.
That is purity, my friend. She's met my mom several times.
Okay. And so Irene says, so the rod in the Bible should not be taken literally. So how should we interpret that? Okay, so
so that, and I was actually looking it up on my phone because that is Proverbs 13, and Proverbs is wisdom, right? A lot of those Bible scriptures are parables. They are lessons for I don't personally, and this is my personal perception. Beating a child does not, it's not love. It is not love. It's not love. And many of us were beaten and did not feel loved. And in today's world, if you beat your child, also you teach them that it's okay for other adults to hit them. Because we tend to confuse children with our actions. You hit them and then you tell them, don't hit your sister, don't hit your brother. And definitely do not become a wife beater or a husband beater. Yet you're the one who introduced them to violence in the home. So for me, I look at it from a logical perspective. How do you, what is love to you? Because this scripture says, whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. Proverbs 13, verse 24. And I am not a preacher. Maybe Purity can come and preach that some other time. But I typically think discipline is what I look at discipline from a perspective of an athlete. Structure, repeating things several times to become excellent at it. There's no person who's become excellent at anything from being beaten. I really don't think, I've not met one who was beaten into excellence. And if there is a part of them that is deeply wounded from those beatings.
Yes, and you know what? The Bible, I'm also a Bible-believing, born-again Christian. The Bible is one book that, we have to be careful about how we interpret things. But also in this podcast, I just want to say that what I'll suggest is you eat the meat and throw away the bones, right? Because we will not agree on everything. But I know that this is something that Joanne is very passionate about, and she says that that's the hill she'll die on.
That is the hill I will die on. If you're a person who beats your child, it's the hill I will die on. I will forever be on your child's side, not on your side. I don't care what your child has done. That's the hill I will die on. The same way, it's the hill I will die on in terms of domestic violence. There's nothing a human being has done that deserves physical violence. So again, that's why I come back to, if you don't want it for yourself, you should not want it for another person, regardless of who the person is. Because hitting a person, to me, if you're capable of looking at a person and beating them up the way you would hit a dog or something that is not a human being, you have to, in your mind, dehumanize that person to unleash that level of violence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually, people are very kind to animals, especially, yeah, right? People are kind to animals, so they. Okay, so Joan, what is your last word, or what is the one thing that if we were to go home or to go elsewhere, what is the one thing that you'd want us to go and live by, or think about, or look for?
I would say a couple of things, and I have them here as stickies that I love, so I'm going to read.
Mm-hmm.
One is: the world mirrors where you are with your evolution, your spiritual growth, your emotional growth, and how you're living in the most healthy, authentic version of yourself. Meaning, you get what you put out in the world. And then secondly, our emotions do not control us. They run through us, and we choose how to respond to them. And therefore, we also have a choice in how we respond to other people's behavior. So nobody can make you do a thing. Your child did not make you beat them. Your husband did not make you insult him. You did not make your husband slap you. You have a choice as a human being to respond or to react. Reactions are usually bad. They're usually harmful.
Mm-hmm.
Responses are how we live life from an authentic, kind, nurturing way to other humans. Because if you respond, your first instinct is not going to be hit the person. But if you react, it's going to be the first instinct.
Okay, I see a comment here. I remember as a child, my mom used to whip us with a switch. I remember telling her as a child, you mind? I'll never hit my kids with a switch, and I never did. Okay, that's Miss Diane. That was my kids' teacher. So she said that she used to be whipped with a switch, and she remembered telling her mom that she'll never do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Joan, you have a wealth of information. You can never give it to us in one day.
Yes.
What I'll do is I'll post your information in the video so that people can know how to get in touch with you. As I said, Joan is a certified coach. The good thing about Joan is that she can work with you from wherever, Timbuktu to Kenya to anywhere, because she doesn't need a license. And like me, I have to be licensed in the state that, so I'm licensed in New Jersey, but if you're my client in New Jersey and you go to Atlanta, I can't even do a telehealth session, because then I'll be practicing out of my jurisdiction. So the good thing about coaches is that they can work with you anywhere and everywhere.
Yes.
And so, Joan, I'm going to put your information out there. Thank you, everyone who was part of this podcast. Joan, thank you so much for your time. I know you had a hectic day. Thank you so much for making it. And our next podcast will be in 2 weeks, and it will be a mom and daughter. They'll talk to a mother and her daughter, and they'll talk to us about their relationship, how they worked to heal their relationship, and what they do. They'll give us practical steps on what to do.
I love it.
I want to say good night to everyone. Good morning to some people. Good night, and thank you so much for joining us. And Joan, I'll get in touch.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Dolly, for having me as your first guest. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm grateful.
Yeah, I thought it was important to have you as the first guest, because we're beginning with the childhood, right? So, we can start talking about marriages and things that are up here, but we need to start from the ground and go up. Yes, from the foundation. Thank you so much, and good night, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.